When you start writing lots of code, and I mean thousands and thousands of lines of code, and you do it all day, every single day, and you write some functions that are going to do lots of different things, and you want to be able to configure it in such a way that it can be reusable through other parts of your project. There's going to be times where some of the parameters in your function, they are not going to need to be used every single time, and you don't expect the developer to have to add those parameters every single time with nil values or with just rubbish values that they don't need to use. Because in the future, if you decide to remove those values, right, you're going to have to go through the whole of your code and remove the usage as well. So there's some ups and downs, some pros and cons with this, all right? And so here we've got a download data. Now, if you write iOS applications, you're going to be writing a download function a lot, all right? Because it's what you do. You always have to download something from the API, or download an image, or download something from somewhere doing something, all right? So you are going to be writing these types of things all the time. And so what we have here is our download data function, and we are downloading the data from this one URL, and then we're going to say we're going to a timeout. Now the body is of no relevance, right? We're just going to print out download data from URL with timeout in seconds. Now, when you start writing like URL session, etc., then it is going to wait so much time until it says, hey, this server is not responding, I'm going to cancel. Now, it can be that you only want that timeout to be so like 2 seconds, but in another time you can say, I'm going to wait for you for 20 seconds, because it can be that sometimes that the server must answer in, say, 250 milliseconds. Other times, this one request could get busy, and the server could get really busy here because it's got to search for some stuff. And so you say, okay, well, it might take 5-10 seconds, so I'll put the timeout at 20 seconds. But if you've got another server where wait a minute, this you might be polling for something, right? And if you don't know what polling is, don't worry about it. But you might say at the end of 60 seconds, if you haven't got anything, let's start a new connection. This is like how they used to do asynchronous calls in the past, all right? But now we have sockets and so on. You don't necessarily have to do this. But so let's start looking at the usage here. We got to see download data from the URL, and this is saying here that it's going to use the default 60 seconds for the timeout because we've given it a default parameter value here. So within inside of the data, if you don't specify it, it's going to use the default one already. Now, if you do specify it, download data from URL with timeouts, then obviously you can change this how you want. And here I've set it to 120 seconds, all right? So the important thing to understand is when you start writing the code, you see code completion here. You see two different versions of this. Download data from is saying, hey, I'm going to use all default parameters, and download data from with means that, hey, you've got to specify both of them. Now, you can obviously remove the with as well if you want, and then just write some random rubbish in here, right? And that is going to do it. But if you want to then add it at a later stage, and then we say with timeout of 2, this is how it works. Now, why should you do this? Now, can you think about it? If you made all of your code, right? This is starting to show this now. If you made all of the areas in your code use this one label, right? But then you're like, wait a minute, I keep providing the same label, the same value over and over again. And you go through your code and you see code repetition everywhere. And you're like, let's just make this a default parameter instead. Well, this is worthwhile, but you now know that all of your code is all using this default parameter by standard. So you have to then go and remove all of it. So it's always worthwhile before you start letting someone use that one code. You need to see whether or not your code, whether it is an optional thing, whether you can allow that person to change it. Is it constant or is it variable? And if it is a variable here, but you don't expect them to change it, then make a default parameter. But this is down to specifically to every function, every piece of code that you're writing. And but what I'm trying to say is we're talking about clean code once again, and this is really part of clean code, is if you don't expect someone to write something, don't make them write code, because you'll end up having to clean it up later in the event that you change your mind. So always try and think about the person in the future that's going to change their mind, and how can you do it in the most efficient way the first time, rather than thinking, don't worry about it, I'll do it later. Because those do it later things, they build up massively. And so if you can make a developer write as minimal code as possible right for the first time, you never have to go into remove anything, and it's always the removing stuff is going to take you a long time. Now granted, Xcode is very good at changing all of the implementations of the code anyway, but sometimes you may find yourself having to check every single line of code in code review to make sure you actually did it properly. So it might be that Xcode changed all the code for you, but you still got to go through code review, making certain that it changed all that code properly. So this is why it's always important to add default parameter values when they can be added. All right. Anyway, with that said, I hope that you've learned something out this video. This was just a simple thing, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to add my experience, my 15 years of experience to these things about why you would want to use them. Because to you, if you're new in programming, it might just be, default parameter values, whatever. But I'm trying to add a level of importance to it for you to think, wait a minute, David said this is something that you should think about, and it's all about saving time in the future with clean code and code review and so on. With that said, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and do all of the other social media things that there are. If you've got any questions, concern, feedback, or you just want to say thank you, then let's start a conversation in the comment section down below. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao, and goodbye.